The fluorescent lights of Premier City Bank flickered overhead as Rosalie Morrison watched her grandmother's hands tremble while counting out $2,800 bills onto the counter. Those same hands had once assembled rifles in the dark, had saluted the American flag for 22 years, had held her grandfather as he took his last breath on a VA hospital bed. Now they trembled not from weakness, but from something else entirely. The weight of being invisible in a country she bled for. If you've ever watched someone you love be treated like they're nothing, like their entire existence doesn't matter, then you need to hear what happens next. Because what unfolded in those next 7 minutes would change everything Rosalie thought she knew about justice, power, and the thin line between right and wrong. And trust me, you'll want that subscribe button ready, because this story doesn't go where you think it does. Tell me where you're watching from. I love hearing how far my stories travel. The bank teller, a sharp-featured young man named Trent Beckwith, whose name tag gleamed a little too proudly on his pressed shirt, looked at the cash like it was something diseased. His eyes traveled from the money to Octavia Hayes' weathered brown hands, then to her face, and Rosalie saw it happen. That microscopic shift in his expression that she'd witnessed 1,000 times before. The moment when someone decided her grandmother was less than human. "That's quite a bit of cash," Trent said, his voice carrying across the marble floors louder than necessary. "Where exactly did this come from?" Octavia's spine straightened with the military precision that decades of service had drilled into her bones. At 68, she still carried herself like the sergeant she'd been, even if her knees ached and her pension barely covered her medications. 6 months of work, young man. Cleaning houses. Every dollar earned on my knees scrubbing other people's floors. It's for my property taxes. Rosalie felt her jaw clench. She'd taken off from her morning shift at the diner. Wages she desperately needed, tips she couldn't afford to lose. Because she'd had a feeling. That sick, twisting feeling in her gut that told her not to let her grandmother do this alone. "Ma'am, we have protocols for large cash transactions." Trent's fingers hovered over his keyboard, not typing, just hovering. "This raises several red flags in our system. Money laundering is a serious federal crime." The words hung in the air like an accusation, like a slap. Rosalie felt her 6-year-old daughter Skylar's hand tighten in hers. She'd brought her along because the school had called about an early dismissal, and now she wished she hadn't. No child should have to see their great-grandmother treated like a criminal. "We have documentation," Rosalie said, her voice quiet but edged with steel. She pulled out the property tax notice, the deposit slips from the check-cashing place, the ledger where her grandmother had meticulously recorded every single house she'd cleaned, every single dollar she'd earned. "Everything is legitimate. Everything is documented. Now please process the deposit so we can pay the taxes before the deadline." Trent's eyes flicked over the papers without really seeing them. "I'm going to need to speak with my manager about this. This kind of transaction requires additional verification." He raised his voice again, and Rosalie realized with cold horror that he was doing it deliberately, making sure everyone in the bank could hear. "We take our responsibility to report suspicious activity very seriously." Around them, other customers were turning to stare. A woman in a designer suit whispered to her companion. A man in a business casual outfit took a deliberate step away from them, as if poverty and suspicion were contagious. Octavia's hand found Rosalie's arm, and Rosalie could feel the tremor running through her grandmother's entire body now. Not fear.
Rage.
The kind of rage that came from serving your country for over 2 decades, from watching your husband die because the VA couldn't get him treatment fast enough, from cleaning the toilets of people who wouldn't even learn your name, and still being treated like you were the problem. "Ma'am, I'm going to have to ask you to step aside while we verify." "Verify what?" Rosalie's voice cracked like a whip. She was done being quiet, done being polite. That my grandmother is an American veteran who served this country with honor? That she's a widow who lost her husband to a war that nobody remembers? That every dollar in that stack came from honest work that would break most people half her age. If you believe that military service means something, that honoring our veterans isn't just a hashtag or a bumper sticker, then you need to hear what happens next. Because sometimes justice doesn't come from the people you expect. Trent's face flushed red. Ma'am, I don't appreciate your tone. And I don't appreciate you treating my grandmother like a criminal. If you don't calm down, I'll have to call security. The air in the bank changed before anyone saw him enter. It was like a pressure shift before a storm, that electric moment when every animal instinct in your body tells you that something apex has just walked into the room. Conversations died mid-sentence. The clicking of keyboard stopped. Even Trent's hand froze over his phone. Rosalie turned and saw him. He moved through the bank like he owned it, and maybe he did. She'd later learned that Dante Vittori owned pieces of half the city, though never in his own name. He wore a suit that probably cost more than her car, black and perfectly tailored, but it was his face that held her attention. Severe features that looked like they'd been carved from marble, dark eyes that missed nothing, and an expression of absolute calm that was somehow more terrifying than anger could ever be. Two men flanked him. One was built like a freight train, all shoulders and silent menace. The other was leaner, sharper, with calculating eyes that cataloged every exit, every person, every potential threat in seconds. They weren't there for a simple deposit. Dante's eyes swept the bank and landed on the scene at the teller window. His gaze traveled from Trent to the scattered documentation, to the stack of cash, to Octavia's rigid posture, to the tears she was fighting not to shed, to Rosalie standing between her grandmother and the world like a shield made of fury and desperation. Something shifted in his expression. Something almost imperceptible, but Rosalie saw it because she was looking, because in that moment everyone was looking at him. His footsteps made no sound on the marble floor, but every eye tracked his movement as he crossed the space between the entrance and the teller window. The bank manager, a sweating man in a suit that didn't fit quite right, materialized from his office like he'd been summoned by some invisible signal. "Mr. Vittori," the manager stammered, "we weren't expecting." Dante raised one hand, barely a gesture, but the manager's mouth snapped shut like he'd been struck. Then Dante turned his attention to Trent, and the young teller actually took a step back. "Is there a problem?" Dante's voice was quiet, conversational even, but it carried the weight of absolute authority. This was a man who had never needed to raise his voice to be obeyed. "Sir, this is a private transaction," Trent began. "I asked you a question." Still quiet. Still calm. Somehow worse than shouting. "Is there a problem with these women conducting their business?" Trent looked to the manager for support, but the manager was staring at his shoes like they were the most fascinating thing in the world. "There are protocols for large cash deposits, sir. Federal regulations require." "Federal regulations." Dante repeated the words like he was tasting them, finding them wanting. He turned to Octavia, and his expression softened in a way that made Rosalie's breath catch. "Signora, is this your money?" Octavia met his eyes without flinching. She'd faced down drill sergeants and enemy combatants and the United States Army bureaucracy. She wasn't about to be intimidated by a man in an expensive suit, no matter how dangerous he looked. "Yes, sir. Every dollar of it. Earned honestly. Cleaning houses. I have the documentation if you'd like to see it." "That won't be necessary." Dante turned back to Trent, and the temperature in the room seemed to drop. "This woman is a veteran. I can see it in the way she stands, the way she looks at you without fear. She's earned the right to be treated with respect in any establishment in this country, especially by people who've never sacrificed anything more significant than their lunch break. What happens next will make you believe that sometimes the heroes don't wear badges, and justice doesn't always come from the law. Keep watching because this is where everything changes. Trent opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. Sir, I was just following protocol.
No.
Dante's voice was soft as silk and sharp as a razor. You were making assumptions based on the color of this woman's skin and the clothes on her back. You saw cash and saw crime because that's what you've been taught to see. Let me teach you something different. He turned to the bank manager, who looked like he wanted to sink into the floor. Gerald. That is your name, isn't it? Gerald Hawthorne, manager of this establishment for 7 years, 3 months, and 16 days. The specificity of it made everyone in the bank understand that Dante Vittori knew things. Everything. About everyone. Why, yes, Mr. Vittori. Gerald, you're going to personally process this deposit right now. You're going to waive any fees. You're going to ensure these women's tax payment reaches the appropriate office before the deadline. And then, Dante's eyes found Trent again. Your employee is going to apologize.
Publicly.
Specifically. For insulting the integrity of a woman who has served this nation with more honor than he will likely ever understand. The bank was silent except for the hum of the air conditioning and someone's phone buzzing, forgotten in their pocket. Mr. Vittori, I don't think, Gerald began. Dante turned his full attention to the manager, and whatever Gerald saw in those dark eyes made his words die in his throat. I have 17 accounts in this bank. My associates have 43 more. We conduct approximately $8 million in transactions through this institution every quarter. Are you understanding me, Gerald? It wasn't a threat. It was a statement of fact, and somehow that was infinitely more powerful. Of course, Mr. Vittori. Right away. Gerald practically ran to the computer behind the teller window, shouldering Trent aside. His fingers flew over the keyboard with the desperate speed of a man trying to save his career. Dante looked at Trent, waiting. The young man's face had gone from red to white to a sickly gray color. His hands were shaking. I apologize.
Ma'am.
I made assumptions that were inappropriate and unprofessional. I'm sorry for the disrespect I showed you. The words were hollow, forced, but Octavia nodded with the grace of someone who had won battles that mattered more than this one. Apology accepted, young man. I hope you learn from this. Dante's expression didn't change, but something in his posture relaxed by a fraction of an inch. He watched Gerald print out the deposit receipt, watched him hand it to Octavia with trembling hands, watched Octavia check the numbers with the thoroughness of someone who'd learned never to trust the system completely. Only when the receipt was safely in Octavia's purse did Dante speak again. Gerald, this young man will be seeking employment elsewhere by the end of the day. I trust you'll provide him with an excellent reference, given his attention to protocol. The way he said the word made it sound like an insult. Then he turned to Octavia and did something that made Rosalie's heart stumble in her chest. He inclined his head in a gesture of respect, the kind of respect you'd show to royalty or a general or someone who had earned their place in the world through blood and sacrifice. Thank you for your service, Signora. My grandmother, may she rest in peace, was also a woman who worked her fingers to the bone for people who never learned her name. She would have liked you. The past tense, the genuine grief in those words, cracked through Dante's armor just enough for Rosalie to see the human underneath the legend. Octavia's eyes softened. What was her name, son? Juliana. Juliana Vittori. She raised me when no one else would. Then she did good work. I'm sorry for your loss. Something passed between them, an understanding that transcended the strangeness of the moment. Two people who had loved and lost and kept going anyway. If you've ever seen someone stand up for what's right when no one else would, smash that like button. Because this story is about to get even more complicated. Dante reached into his jacket and Rosalie's entire body tensed, some primal part of her brain screaming danger. But what he pulled out was a business card, simple and elegant, with just a name and a phone number embossed in black. If anyone ever treats you with disrespect again, you call this number. Immediately. He held it out to Octavia. Rosalie stepped forward, her voice finding strength she didn't know she had. We don't need charity. Dante's eyes met hers for the first time, really met them, and Rosalie felt the impact of that gaze like a physical thing. He was looking at her, seeing her, in a way that made her feel simultaneously exposed and safe, which made no sense at all. It's not charity, he said quietly. It's respect. Something you should have received the moment you walked through that door. He placed the card in Octavia's hand, his fingers gentle despite their obvious strength. I hope you never need to use it. But if you do, I'll answer. Then he was leaving, his men falling into step behind him like shadows, and the bank slowly started breathing again. Conversations resumed in hushed whispers. Keyboards clicked back to life. But everything had changed, and everyone knew it. Rosalie guided her grandmother and daughter toward the exit, her mind reeling. Skylar's small voice broke the spell. Mama, who was that man? I don't know, baby. I don't know. But she would. Oh, she would. That night, after Skylar was asleep in her small bedroom of their cramped apartment, after Rosalie had double-checked that the door was locked and the windows were secure the way she always did, because the neighborhood wasn't safe and she couldn't afford anywhere better, she sat on her worn couch and Googled the name on the card her grandmother had insisted she keep. Dante Vittori, suspected organized crime leader. Alleged connections to every major criminal enterprise in Detroit. Never convicted, despite multiple investigations. Known for ruthless enforcement of territory and equally ruthless protection of certain neighborhoods. Funded community programs that the city wouldn't touch. Operated legitimate businesses that employed hundreds. Rumored to have personally intervened in situations involving domestic violence, elder abuse, and child endangerment with methods that left no evidence but solved the problems permanently. The internet couldn't decide if he was a monster or a savior. The truth, Rosalie suspected, was that he was both. Or neither. Or something else entirely that didn't fit into neat categories. She should throw the card away. Should forget this ever happened. Should be grateful for the help and move on with her life. The same exhausting cycle of working 2 jobs and barely keeping her head above water and trying to be enough for her daughter, even though she was just so tired all the time. She threw the card in the trash. At 2 a.m, she retrieved it. 3 weeks passed. 3 weeks of waiting tables at the diner where the coffee was always burnt and the truckers left either great tips or none at all, depending on factors she could never predict. 3 weeks of stocking shelves at the grocery store during the evening shift, her feet aching, her back screaming, her mind counting pennies and rationing groceries, and trying to figure out how to make Skylar's shoes last another month even though they were already too small. 3 weeks of nothing happening, which should have been a relief. But Rosalie couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted that day in the bank. Like a stone had been dropped into still water, and the ripples were still spreading outward, invisible but inevitable. She was right. It was a Thursday night, unremarkable in every way except that it was the night everything changed. Rosalie was closing the diner, the last one out as usual because she needed those extra 15 minutes of pay. She'd parked under a streetlight. She always parked under streetlights, but the bulb had burned out sometime during her shift. She was fumbling with her keys, exhaustion making her clumsy, when the car pulled up. Black sedan. Tinted windows. Engine purring with the quiet confidence of expensive machinery. Wrong in every way that mattered. 2 men got out. They weren't rushing, weren't threatening. That's what made it terrifying. They approached with the casual certainty of people who knew she had nowhere to run, no one to call, no protection against whatever they wanted. Rosalie Morrison. The first man said her name like he'd said it before, practiced it. Pretty name. Pretty daughter, too. Skylar, right? 6 years old? Attends Jefferson Elementary? Her blood turned to ice water in her veins. Her hands stopped shaking, stopped fumbling. Everything stopped except her mind, which was suddenly crystal clear and screaming one word over and over: run. But she couldn't run, because they knew where Skylar was. What do you want? Her voice came out steady. She was proud of that. We don't want anything from you, sweetheart. You're just a message. The second man held up his phone, showed her a photo. Skylar on the playground at school, her blonde hair bright in the sunlight, that gap-toothed smile that made Rosalie's heart hurt with love and fear in equal measure. What happens next will make you understand why sometimes you need someone dangerous on your side. Don't go anywhere, because this story is about to explode in ways you won't believe. Tell Dante Vittori that people he cares about aren't as safe as he thinks. Tell him Carlo Calabrese says hello. Tell him to remember that everyone has something to lose. The first man tucked a business card under her windshield wiper. Not Dante's card, but another one, cheaper, with a phone number and nothing else. You seem like a smart girl. Innocent. We'd hate to see anything happen to you or that pretty little daughter of yours. But business is business, you understand? They were back in their car and gone before Rosalie's knees gave out. She caught herself against the hood of her ancient Toyota, her breath coming in harsh gasps, her mind fracturing into 1,000 pieces of terror and fury and absolute clarity. She called the police. Of course, she called the police. They took a report, told her to be careful, said they'd increase patrols in her neighborhood. Did nothing because what could they do? No crime had been committed. No threat had been explicit enough to prosecute. Just implications and photographs and the cold certainty that she and Skylar were pawns in a game they didn't understand. The police left. Rosalie sat in her car under the broken streetlight and shook. Then she pulled out her phone and scrolled through her contacts to a number she'd saved 3 weeks ago, a number she'd sworn she'd never use, a number that represented everything dangerous and complicated and wrong. Her finger hovered over the call button. Skylar's face in that photograph. That smile. That innocence. She pressed call. He answered on the first ring. Rosalie. Not a question. Like he'd been waiting. Like he'd known. Just her name in his voice, and somehow that made everything worse and better at the same time. They threatened my daughter. Her voice cracked. They showed me a picture of my daughter at school. They said she couldn't finish. Couldn't say the words out loud because that would make them too real. The silence on the other end of the line lasted less than 3 seconds, but in those seconds Rosalie heard something shift. Something cold and final and absolutely terrifying. When Dante spoke again, his voice was soft. Gentle. The way you'd speak to someone standing on a ledge. Where are you right now? Outside the diner. My car. Lock your doors. I'm sending someone. You'll be safe in 15 minutes. Do you understand me, Rosalie? In 15 minutes, you will be safe. I can't just... I have to pick up Skylar from my neighbors. I have to. I'll send 2 cars. One for you. One for your daughter and grandmother. They're professionals. They won't scare Skylar. But I need you to trust me right now.
Can you do that? Could she?
Trust a man whose name was synonymous with violence? Trust someone whose protection came with prices she couldn't even imagine? But they'd threatened Skylar. They'd photographed her baby without permission, without conscience, and used that smile as a weapon. Yes, Rosalie whispered. Yes, I trust you. Good girl. Lock your doors. I'm on my way. The line went dead, and Rosalie realized she was crying, hot tears streaming down her face in the darkness of her car, in the parking lot of a diner that smelled like grease and defeat, in a life that had just tilted completely off its axis. 12 minutes later, a black SUV pulled into the parking lot. The same man who'd flanked Dante at the bank, the one built like a freight train, got out and approached her window with his hands visible, palms out, unthreatening despite his size. She rolled down her window 1 inch. "Ms. Morrison, my name is Enzo. Boss sent me to bring you somewhere safe. My partner's already picking up your daughter and grandmother. They're fine. I promise you they're fine." "How do I know?" He held up his phone, FaceTime already connected. Rosalie saw her neighbor's living room, saw Skylar sitting on the couch watching cartoons, oblivious, safe. Another man, this one in a suit, was speaking quietly with her neighbor, who was nodding, looking concerned but not frightened. "They'll be taken to the same place I'm taking you. It's secure. It's comfortable. And the boss will be there to explain everything." Rosalie looked at this man, this enforcer, this criminal, this person who worked for Dante Vittori, and saw only genuine concern in his eyes. She got out of her car. The building was downtown, glass and steel and money. The penthouse took up the entire top floor. Octavia and Skylar arrived 10 minutes after Rosalie, Skylar chattering excitedly about the cool car, while Octavia's sharp eyes took in everything and missed nothing. "Rosalie," her grandmother started. "I know, Grandma. I know." But they threatened Skylar. They knew where she goes to school. Octavia's jaw tightened, and Rosalie saw the soldier emerge. "Then we listen to what Mr. Vittori has to say. And then we decide." Dante arrived an hour later. Rosalie heard his footsteps in the hallway before she saw him, heard Enzo's quiet greeting, heard the low murmur of conversation in Italian. Then he was there, standing in the doorway of the living room where Skylar was asleep on the couch and Octavia was watching Rosalie with worried eyes. He looked different than he had at the bank. Less controlled. His tie was loose, his jacket was off, and there was something raw in his expression when his eyes found hers. "This is my fault," he said without preamble. "I made you visible. By defending you publicly, I made you part of my world without your permission. That's on me." Rosalie stood up, surprised by her own steadiness. "What do they want?" "They want me to know I'm vulnerable, that I care about something which in my world is a weakness they can exploit." He moved into the room slowly, like he was afraid of spooking her. "Carlo Calabrese has been trying to move into territory I control for 2 years. He sees you as leverage." "Who is he?" "Someone who mistakes cruelty for strength. Someone who needs to be reminded of the difference." Dante's voice went cold again, that terrifying calm settling over him like a mask. "He won't touch you or your family. I'll make sure of it."
"How?"
Their eyes met, and Rosalie saw him make a decision. Saw him choose honesty over comfort. "It's better that you don't know the details. But I want you to understand who I am, what I am, before you trust me with the most precious things in your life." He gestured to Skylar sleeping on the couch. "I'm not a good man, Rosalie. I've built an empire on fear and force. I've done things that would horrify you. I've made choices that can't be unmade and left scars that won't heal. But I have rules. No innocence. No children. No disrespect to those who've earned respect. And us? Why do we matter to you?" The question came out softer than she intended. Dante was quiet for a long moment, his eyes never leaving hers. "When I was 15, I watched a store clerk accuse my grandmother of stealing because she was counting her change slowly. Her hands had arthritis. She was in pain. And this woman treated her like a thief because she was old and slow and didn't speak English well. I couldn't do anything. I was a kid. Powerless. That feeling, his hands clenched into fists. I swore I'd never be powerless again. That I'd never watch someone I cared about be humiliated and be unable to stop it. So you became this. I've became what I needed to be to protect what matters. And you and your grandmother, your daughter. You remind me why I built all this in the first place. Not for power. Not for money. For the people who deserve safety and can't find it anywhere else. If your heart is racing right now, if you need to know what happens next, hit that subscribe button because this story is about to take you places you've never been. Octavia spoke up from her chair, her voice carrying the weight of 8 decades of wisdom. Mr. Vittori, my granddaughter has been protecting everyone her whole life. Her daughter, me. Everyone except herself. I'm asking you plainly, can you protect her? Really protect her? Or are you just going to make things worse? Dante turned to Octavia and met her eyes with the same respect he'd shown in the bank. Mrs. Hayes, I give you my word. And in my world, my word is the only currency that matters. I will protect them with everything I have, everything I am. And when this is over, if Rosalie wants nothing more to do with me, she'll be free to walk away with no obligations, no strings, no consequences. You have my word on that as well. And if she doesn't want to walk away? Octavia asked quietly. The question hung in the air between them, heavy with implications that Rosalie wasn't ready to examine. Dante's eyes found hers again. Then we figured out. Together. That night, after Octavia had taken Skylar to one of the bedrooms and closed the door, after the apartment had gone quiet except for the distant sounds of the city below, Rosalie found Dante on the balcony. The Detroit skyline glittered before them, beautiful and harsh and unforgiving. Can't sleep? She asked. Old habit. Too many years of watching my back. He didn't turn around, just kept staring at the lights. You should rest. Tomorrow's going to be complicated. What happens tomorrow? I handle the threat. You stay here, stay safe. And when it's over, you get your life back. Rosalie moved to stand beside him, close enough to feel the heat radiating from his body, far enough to maintain the fiction that this was all business. What if I don't want my old life back? What if? She stopped, unsure how to finish that thought. Dante turned to look at her, really look at her, and Rosalie felt pinned by that gaze. What if what? What if the last 3 weeks I've been thinking about a man I shouldn't be thinking about? What if I'm tired of just surviving and want to remember what living feels like? What if I'm terrified of you and drawn to you in equal measure, and I don't know what to do with that? The words tumbled out before she could stop them, and she watched something shift in Dante's expression. Something human and hungry and carefully controlled. Rosalie, if we do this, if we start something, there's no going back. My world will touch you. It already has, but it'll be worse. More complicated. More dangerous. I know what you are, she said softly. I've Googled you. I've read the articles, the allegations, the rumors. I know you're dangerous. But you're also the only person who's seen me, really seen me, in longer than I can remember. Not as a struggling single mom. Not as a charity case. Just as me. Dante reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. His fingers lingered against her cheek, and Rosalie's breath caught. You deserve better than me, he said quietly. Maybe. But you're what I want. The kiss was inevitable. Soft at first, tentative, both of them testing boundaries and discovering possibilities. Then deeper, urgent, months of loneliness and years of being strong meeting in that moment on a balcony overlooking a city that didn't care about either of them. When they broke apart, Dante rested his forehead against hers. This is dangerous. I know. I could destroy everything you've built, or you could make me stronger. He pulled back to look at her, and Rosalie saw wonder in his eyes, like He couldn't quite believe she was real. "How are you not afraid of me?" "I am afraid of you, but I'm more afraid of spending the rest of my life wondering what if. And my daughter just got threatened because someone thinks I matter to you. So maybe I should lean into that instead of running from it." The next 2 weeks were a study in contrasts. During the day, Rosalie existed in a strange bubble of safety. The penthouse became her world, spacious and secure and comfortable in ways her apartment had never been. Skylar thought it was an adventure, playing with toys that appeared from somewhere, eating meals that someone else prepared, sleeping in a bed bigger than the one she and Rosalie had shared in their old life. Octavia was quieter, watching everything with the tactical assessment of someone who'd spent decades evaluating threats. But she didn't protest, didn't suggest they leave. She saw what Rosalie was just beginning to understand, that sometimes the monster was also the shield. Dante came every evening. Not for long. He had an empire to run, a threat to neutralize, a war to wage in shadows and silence. But he came, brought dinner, sat with Skylar and taught her Italian words that made her giggle, played cards with Octavia and listened to her stories about the army, about her husband, about the life she'd built and lost and rebuilt. And late at night, when everyone else was asleep, he and Rosalie would sit on the balcony and talk. About everything. About nothing. About the lives they'd lived, and the choices they'd made, and the people they'd become. "Tell me about your grandmother," Rosalie said one night, curled up beside him on the outdoor couch, a blanket wrapped around her shoulders against the October chill. Dante was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, Giuliana Vittori came to America when she was 19 with nothing but a sewing machine and determination. Married my grandfather, had my father, worked as a seamstress her entire life. When my parents were killed, I was 5. She took me in without hesitation. Raised me, taught me about honor and respect and protecting what matters. She died 2 years ago. Heart attack.
Quick.
I'm grateful for that at least. She didn't suffer. I'm sorry. She would have loved you, Dante said softly. Both of you. She had no patience for people who judged others by their bank account or their skin color. She'd have admired your strength. I don't feel strong. That's because you don't recognize your own power. You've raised a beautiful daughter alone. You've worked yourself to exhaustion keeping your family safe. You've protected your grandmother with everything you have. That's not weakness, Rosalie. That's steel wrapped in softness. The words settled into her chest, warm and aching. No one had ever called her strong before.
Tired, yes.
Struggling, definitely. But strong? What happens when this is over? She asked, even though she was afraid of the answer. Dante's arm tightened around her shoulders. That depends on you. If you want to leave, I'll make sure you're set up somewhere safe. Different city if you want. New identity, if necessary. Money to start over properly. No strings. And if I don't want to leave, then we figure out how to make this work. You and Skylar and your grandmother, safe and protected. Me, trying to be worthy of that trust. You keep saying, when this is over. When will it be over? Dante's expression went cold, and Rosalie glimpsed the other side of him. The part that made grown men afraid.
Soon.
Very soon. She didn't ask for details. Didn't want to know the specifics of what he was doing to protect them. Some part of her understood that ignorance was its own kind of protection. But 3 days later, she got the phone call. Enzo's voice, calm and professional. "Ms. Morrison, we need you to identify someone. Just a precaution. You're completely safe, but we need confirmation." They brought her to a warehouse in an industrial part of the city. Dante was there, and the sight of him made something in her chest unclench. He looked tired, his shirt sleeves rolled up, his hair disarrayed like he'd been running his hands through it. "You don't have to do this," he said immediately. "But we need to make sure we have the right people." "The ones who threatened Skylar?" "Yes." Rosalie squared her shoulders. "Show me." They were in a room, behind one-way glass. Two men sitting in chairs, hands zip-tied, looking significantly less confident than they had in that parking lot. Rosalie recognized them immediately. "That's them." Dante nodded once to Enzo, who disappeared through a side door. Then Dante turned to Rosalie, his expression unreadable. "Thank you. Enzo will take you back now." "What happens to them?" "Nothing that concerns you."
Dante.
She caught his arm, felt the tension in his muscles. "What happens?" He looked at her for a long moment, and she saw him weighing honesty against protection. "They'll answer questions. They'll give me information about Carlo Calabrese's operations. And then they'll leave Detroit and never come back. If they're smart. And if they're not smart?" Dante's silence was answer enough. Rosalie should have been horrified. Should have recoiled from this man who spoke so casually about violence and consequences. But all she could think about was Skylar's photo on that phone, the casual cruelty in those men's voices, the way they'd used her daughter as a weapon. "Good," she heard herself say. "I hope they're not smart." Something shifted in Dante's expression. Not approval exactly, but understanding. Recognition. "Go home, Rosalie. Get some rest. This part isn't for you." But as she walked away, Enzo falling into step beside her, she realized that this part was for her. All of it. The protection, the violence, the moral complexity of loving a man who operated outside the law to enforce his own version of justice. This was the price of safety in a world that hadn't kept her safe before. And she was willing to pay it. If you're still watching, if this story has you questioning everything you thought you knew about right and wrong, drop a comment below. Because we're not done yet. Not even close. 4 days later, Dante came to the penthouse in the middle of the afternoon, which he'd never done before. Rosalie was helping Skylar with her homework. A tutor came to the penthouse daily now, another luxury she was still adjusting to, when she heard his voice in the entryway. One look at his face, and she knew. It's over. It's over. Carlo Calabrese is no longer a problem. His organization has been absorbed. The men who threatened you have been dealt with. You're safe. The words should have brought relief. Instead, Rosalie felt something twist in her chest. "So, we can go home now." It wasn't a question, but Dante answered anyway. "You can go anywhere you want. Your apartment, if that's what you prefer. Though I'd like to offer you an alternative." "What kind of alternative?" "I own properties throughout the city. Buildings where you'd have security, safety. A place where Skylar could have her own room, where your grandmother wouldn't have to worry about stairs or break-ins. No rent. No obligation. Just, let me make sure you're protected." Rosalie felt Octavia's presence before she spoke. Her grandmother had a way of materializing whenever important conversations were happening, decades of military intelligence training making her preternaturally aware. "Mr. Vittori," Octavia said quietly, "are you offering my granddaughter charity or something else?" Dante had the grace to look uncomfortable, which was somehow endearing on a man who commanded an empire through intimidation. "Mrs. Hayes, I'm offering whatever Rosalie is willing to accept. If she wants to go back to her life as it was, I'll respect that. But if she's willing to let me be part of that life, in whatever capacity she's comfortable with, then I'd like the chance to prove I can be more than just a crisis she survived." Octavia studied him with the intensity of a woman who'd interrogated enemy combatants. "You love her." It wasn't a question, but Dante answered it anyway. "Yes, ma'am. I do. I didn't plan to, didn't want to, but I do." Rosalie's breath caught. They hadn't said those words yet. had danced around them in late-night conversations and stolen kisses, but never spoken them out loud in daylight where they couldn't be taken back. And my great-granddaughter? I would protect Skylar with my life. The same way I'd protect Rosalie. The same way I'd protect you. He stopped, searching for words. My nana used to say that family isn't always blood. Sometimes it's the people you choose. The people who choose you back. If you'll have me, I'd like to be family. For the first time since meeting Dante Vittori, Rosalie saw her grandmother smile. Not a polite smile. A real one, warm and genuine. Then I suppose we'd better discuss living arrangements. Because that apartment was barely suitable for one person, let alone 3.5. 3.5. Dante looked confused. Octavia's smile widened. You, Mr. Vittori. You're the half. You'll be around so much you might as well have your own room. Though I suspect you'll be sharing my granddaughter's. Grandma. Rosalie felt her face flush hot. But Dante was laughing, real laughter that transformed his face from severe to something younger, lighter. Yes, ma'am. I suspect you're right. That evening, after they discussed logistics and looked at photos of potential apartments, and Dante had promised to set up interviews for Rosalie with his property management company, real jobs with real salaries, not charity disguised as employment, they found themselves alone again on the balcony. You don't have to do all this, Rosalie said softly. The apartment, the job offers, the security. We were surviving before. Surviving isn't living. Dante pulled her closer, his arms wrapping around her waist. And you deserve to live, Rosalie. Really live. Not just scrape by hoping nothing breaks, nothing fails, nothing falls apart. You deserve stability, safety, joy. What do you get out of this? She had to ask, had to understand his motivations. You're this powerful man with a whole city under your control. Why us? Why me? Dante was quiet for a moment, his chin resting on top of her head. When he spoke, his voice was raw in a way she'd never heard before. You make me remember who I wanted to be before life made me into this. You and Skylar and your grandmother. You're proof that goodness still exists in the world. That not everything has to be bought or controlled or taken by force. Being with you feels like redemption, even though I don't deserve it. Rosalie turned in his arms to face him. Maybe redemption isn't about deserving it. Maybe it's about choosing to be better, even when you don't have to be. Is that what you think I'm doing? I think you're a man who's spent his whole life protecting people because no one protected you. I think you built an empire on fear because love failed you once. And I think maybe, you're ready to believe that love doesn't always fail. Dante's hands came up to frame her face, his touch infinitely gentle for someone capable of such violence. I love you, Rosalie Morrison. I love your strength and your courage, and the way you've fought for your family every single day. I love that you see the monster in me and choose to stay anyway. And if you'll let me, I'll spend the rest of my life proving that I can be the man you deserve. Tears blurred Rosalie's vision, but they were good tears. Relief and hope and something that felt dangerously like happiness. I love you too. God help me, I love you too. All of you. Even the parts that scare me. The kiss was different this time. Not tentative or urgent, but certain. A promise made and accepted. A future decided by two people who'd found each other in the most unlikely circumstances and chosen to build something real from the wreckage of their separate lives. When they broke apart, Rosalie laughed breathlessly. My life was so simple 3 weeks ago. Wake up, work, take care of Skylar, go to sleep, repeat. Now I'm in love with a crime boss and living in a penthouse, and my grandmother is making jokes about our sleeping arrangements. Do you regret it? Not even a little bit. She meant it. Every word. But I need you to promise me something. Anything. Keep that part of your life away from Skylar. The violence, the business, all of it. She can know you're important, that people respect you, but I need her childhood to be normal. As normal as possible.
Done.
She'll never see that side of me. I swear it. And when she's older, when she asks questions, we'll tell her the truth. Together. When she's ready to understand that the world isn't black and white, that sometimes good people do bad things for the right reasons. Dante's expression grew serious. But Rosalie, there may come a time when my past catches up to me. When the choices I've made have consequences. If that happens. She pressed her fingers to his lips. Then we'll handle it. Together. That's what this means, right? We're in this together? Together, Dante agreed, kissing her fingers. For as long as you'll have me. If you believe in second chances, if you believe that people can change and love can heal even the deepest wounds, hit that subscribe button and join this community. Because everyone deserves to find their person, even in the most unexpected places. 6 months later, Rosalie stood in the kitchen of an apartment that still didn't feel quite real. 3 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, a kitchen with appliances that actually worked, windows that overlooked a park where Skylar could play safely. Security that was invisible but ever-present. A life that felt like something from someone else's dream. She was managing properties for Dante's real estate company now, legitimate work with a legitimate salary that meant she could finally breathe. Could save money. Could think about the future instead of just surviving the present. She'd enrolled in online business classes. Dante had offered to pay, and after 3 arguments about pride versus pragmatism, she'd accepted with the condition that she'd pay him back someday. They both knew she never would, and they both pretended otherwise. Octavia had started working part-time for Dante's charitable foundation, directing community programs and veteran services. She'd found purpose again, found a way to serve that didn't require scrubbing floors or swallowing her pride. And she'd found something else too. Peace. The kind that came from knowing her granddaughter was safe, her great-granddaughter was thriving, and the man who'd entered their lives in such a dramatic fashion was genuinely devoted to their well-being. Mama, is Mr. Dante coming for dinner? Skylar appeared in the doorway, her homework finished, her hair escaping from its ponytail. She was wearing new shoes that actually fit, and the sight still made Rosalie's throat tight with gratitude. Yes, baby. He'll be here soon. Good. I made him a picture at school. It's us. Our family. Skylar said it so casually, like it was the most natural thing in the world to include Dante in their family portrait. Rosalie's heart did something complicated in her chest. Can I see it? Skylar ran to get it, and Rosalie studied the crayon drawing with its stick figures and bright colors. There she was, and Skylar and Octavia. And there was Dante, distinguished by his dark suit and the smile Skylar had given him, holding Skylar's hand on one side and Rosalie's on the other. It's beautiful, sweetheart. We're happy now, Skylar said matter-of-factly. Before we were okay, but now we're happy. I can tell the difference. Children saw things adults tried to hide. Rosalie pulled her daughter close, breathing in the strawberry scent of her shampoo. Yes, baby. We're happy now. The door opened. Dante had his own key now, another symbol of trust and commitment, and Skylar launched herself at him with the unself-conscious affection of a child who'd learned she was safe to love openly. Dante caught her easily, lifting her up, and the smile on his face was nothing like the cold mask he wore for the rest of the world. This was genuine, unguarded, real. I made you a picture.
Did you?
I can't wait to see it. While Skylar showed him her artwork, explaining each figure in elaborate detail, Rosalie watched from the kitchen and felt something settle into place. This was her life now. Complicated and unconventional and occasionally terrifying, but unmistakably hers. Dante met her eyes over Skylar's head, and the look he gave her was full of promises kept and promises yet to make. Later, after dinner was eaten and dishes were washed and Skylar was tucked into bed with a story, after Octavia had retreated to her room with her book and her herbal tea, they would have their time. Would talk about their days and their dreams and the future they were building together. But for now, in this moment, Rosalie was content to watch the man she loved play with her daughter and know that sometimes the most beautiful things came from the darkest places. That protection could look like violence, and love could wear the face of danger, and redemption was possible even for those who thought they were beyond saving. That night, long after everyone else was asleep, Rosalie found Dante on the balcony, their balcony now in their home. He pulled her close, and they stood there wrapped in each other, looking out at the city lights that no longer seemed quite so harsh. "I never thanked you," Rosalie said softly, "for that day in the bank, for seeing us when no one else did. You don't need to thank me. That day changed my life too. Reminded me that power means nothing if you don't use it to protect what matters. Do we matter? You matter more than anything else in this world." Dante turned her to face him, his hands gentle on her shoulders. "I've built an empire, Rosalie. I control territory and command loyalty and make people afraid. But none of it means anything compared to this. To you and Skylar, and the life we're building. This is what I was protecting all along. I just didn't know it until I saw you standing in that bank, fierce and beautiful, and refusing to let anyone diminish your grandmother's dignity." 3 years later, Rosalie stood in that same kitchen, but everything had changed and nothing had changed. Skylar was 9 now, thriving in a private school that Rosalie could actually afford with her salary as Director of Property Management for Vittori Enterprises. Octavia was 71, still sharp as ever, still running veteran programs and community outreach with the efficiency of someone who'd commanded troops. And Dante was making pancakes, while Skylar gave him extremely specific instructions about chocolate chip placement, and Octavia rolled her eyes affectionately from her seat at the table. "You're going to give her a stomachache with all that sugar," Octavia warned. "Nah. Skylar had started calling Octavia that 6 months ago, mixing her great-grandmother's heritage with Dante's Italian influence. "It's Saturday. Saturday means special breakfast. Don't nana me, child." I know manipulation when I hear it. But she was smiling, and so was Skylar, and so was Dante as he expertly flipped a pancake that was more chocolate chip than batter. Rosalie watched from the doorway, her hand unconsciously moving to rest on her still flat stomach. She hadn't told anyone yet, hadn't quite processed it herself, but she was pregnant. 3 months along, and terrified and excited in equal measure. Dante caught her eye, and something in her expression must have given her away, because he went still, spatula frozen mid-flip. Their eyes met across the kitchen, and she saw him understand. Saw shock and wonder and fierce protectiveness flash across his face in rapid succession. He said nothing, just gave her a slight nod. Later. They'd talk later. But the smile that spread across his face was like sunrise, transforming everything. "Mama, you're making your weird face," Skylar announced. "The one you make when you have a secret." "No secrets," Rosalie lied. "Just thinking about how lucky I am." "Lucky how?" Skylar demanded. "Lucky to have all of you. Lucky that sometimes the scariest day of your life turns into the beginning of something beautiful." Rosalie moved into the kitchen, pressed a kiss to her daughter's head, squeezed her grandmother's shoulder, and let Dante pull her close with his free arm while he somehow continued making pancakes. "This is weird," Skylar declared. "But good weird. The best kind of weird," Dante agreed, his hand warm and protective on Rosalie's back. And as they stood there in that kitchen that smelled like chocolate and coffee and home, Rosalie thought about the woman she'd been 3 years ago, exhausted and scared and just trying to survive one more day. She thought about a grandmother who deserved respect and received humiliation. She thought about a man who'd built walls around his heart until a family he couldn't ignore broke through them. She thought about how life could change in a single moment, in a bank on an ordinary Tuesday, when someone powerful chose to use that power for good instead of evil. How protection could look like danger and love could come from the most unexpected places. And she thought about the future, about raising 2 children with a man who would move heaven and earth to keep them safe, about teaching those children that the world was complicated, that people were rarely purely good or purely evil, that sometimes the right choice was the hard one, and the hard choice was the right one. If you're still here, if this story touched something in you, if you believe that everyone deserves a chance at happiness no matter how unconventional it looks, make sure you're subscribed to this channel. Drop a comment telling us what you thought. Hit that like button if you believe in second chances and found families and love that transforms everything. Because at the end of the day, that's what this story is about. Not mafia bosses or bank confrontations or dramatic rescues. It's about people finding each other in the chaos. It's about building something real from broken pieces. It's about love fierce enough to protect and gentle enough to heal. It's about a poor single mom and her Black grandmother who walked into a bank expecting nothing and walked out with everything that mattered. This is their story. But maybe if you're lucky, it's your story too. Because we all deserve to be seen. We all deserve love and respect. We all deserve someone who will stand up for us when no one else will. Thank you for watching. Like and subscribe for more stories about love, redemption, and the beautiful messiness of real life. Comment, we all deserve love and respect if you watched everything.